Oh. Ooh. Ooh.
Hello, Kirill. So I went ahead and started the recording. So I'm excited to get the API working group started. I think that it'll be good to have a central place for us to talk about API related issues and new features. I think that one of the difficulties that an open source project has is that there are people from disparate places and with disparate motivations working on the same code base, which can lead to inconsistencies when people just don't end up communicating, like not intentionally not being communicative, but you just may not know that someone else is working on something that is slightly inconsistent with what you're working on. And when we're talking about APIs, public facing interfaces, trying to maintain consistency is really useful for our users. So I hope that that's one of the things that we can push toward with this working group. So we don't have a lot on the agenda for today. I put a couple items down. Gaston put one item down. So I'm just going to share my screen and we can take a look at the agenda and just go through what we have there. So maybe we can start talking about the second item here first. And of course, if anybody has other things they want to add to this list now or as we go, feel free. So I thought it would make sense for us to start off. Oh, and I should mention that I think Vinod is on leave right now, and that's why he wasn't able to join, but he'll definitely be here once he's back at work. Going forward, he'll also be attending these meetings for sure, because he's one of the, or probably the point of contact currently for big API changes. So I thought we could discuss just what we envision for this working group, what types of things we would like to accomplish here. So I mean, one of the obvious purposes to me is just to provide a forum to discuss API related issues and new features that people are adding. I think that's in line with what the other working groups are doing. One thing that had occurred to me, and I don't really know if I think this is a good idea or not, but one thing that had occurred to me, one possible purpose for this working group is to serve as kind of a committee for approval of new API changes. If someone wants to alter an existing interface or introduce some significant extension of an API, that this working group could be like an entry point for those new developments, and that could help us ensure consistency in the APIs. So that's one thing that I kind of wanted to bring up and just ask all of y'all if you think that that's a reasonable idea. Is that something we should seek to do in this working group, or does that not make sense? What do y'all think?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
So what you think it makes sense? How would you imagine, like, do you think we should set a strict rule or requirement? Like, if you are going to make a significant change to any public interface, you have to bring it up at the API working group? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I don't see a reason not to do that. Like, have discussion on public API is always good. And instead of burying some review requests on review board, I would rather like have a more public discussion on all the API changes that we plan to do in this project.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that it could be a hindrance to people? Like, I guess we have to make sure that the meetings occur often enough that it won't block people. Do you think that could be a problem?
Yeah, I think that's where there's a little bit of a potential hindrance. Like, at the very least, you would hope that you could surface API changes on the mailing list to make it less of a just a review flying by when no one really knows that that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then, if people are like, hey, this really doesn't quite seem right, can we talk about this at the next meeting? Then I think that's where we could bring it here. But I don't know if you're going to run these meetings like monthly, or if it's something like that, that seems kind of challenging to help people make progress.
Yeah, I mean, we can do like either we do bi-weekly or we do something like on demand, that there's some big changes coming in and we need some discussion, and then we can schedule ad hoc API working group meetings. I think that sounds fine. I mean, yeah, monthly might be too long.
Yeah, just as another thing, I've kind of noticed that for better and for worse, like due to Slack, we don't nearly have enough conversations on the dev list anymore. Things kind of slip by in Slack, and I don't know about others, but I'm trying to actually like reduce the amount that Slack is constantly distracting me, which means I'll sometimes miss those like important conversations that are happening because they're occurring synchronously on Slack. Something like an API change, for example, you could discuss it on Slack, but I would hope that someone would surface it on the mailing list, which is more like a broadcasting mechanism, right?
Yeah, and it's something that we have a good record of, which is useful.
Right.
I think having a tiered system that you described, Ben, where we ask everyone to surface API changes on the mailing list and then use that as an opportunity for people to push it into the working group if further discussion is necessary. That sounds pretty good to me. Is there anybody else with thoughts on this? Any thoughts?
I guess one of my questions is, like, if we were going to push API changes into this working group, we would need to have a step where we just like gather the people who we think might be stakeholders for the change and make sure that they get to come to the working group too. Because I imagine that like people with general interest in API changes won't be the same set of people that have specific interest in any given API change.
Yeah, I think that's true. We would want to make sure on the mailing list that we loop the right people in. Yeah, that's a good point. So I wanted to bring up the second item because it kind of, it impacts the first item, as we mentioned, how often we want to have these. I was thinking it would be nice to start off doing a regular cadence, and then if we determine that it's that it's too often and we just want to go to an on-demand schedule, we could do that. But I thought it would be nice initially to start with the regular cadence and just see how that goes. I was thinking either bi-weekly or monthly. I think containerization working group currently meets bi-weekly, performance meets monthly. I'm not really sure which I would prefer right now. What do y'all think?
I think we would start with bi-weekly, and if the agenda is empty, then move to monthly.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable, like bi-weekly initially.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. So I think, yeah, maybe we can start with bi-weekly regular meetings. And I could send out an email to the dev list informing people that we're asking folks to, I mean, I think hopefully, like you said, Ben, hopefully this is something people already do, but we can reiterate that we would like all public API changes to be announced on the mailing list first. And that'll give people an opportunity to ask for a discussion in the working group if they desire. So I can send that email out. And cool, the next item that we had was a review of the current compatibility and deprecation policy. So let's take a look at that. I was looking at that as well just before this meeting. And looking at it now, I'm not sure that we're actually sticking to this very strictly currently. So, well, certainly we often go long on the amount of time between releases, right? So in the policy, we're stating an intention to do a new release every 2 months. And one thing that I had forgotten was that we say that we support each minor release for 6 months. Is that something that we've been sticking to, or have we been doing point releases longer than 6 months, I feel?
Well, I think that number was based on a release getting cut every 2 months, so supporting 3 releases.
Mm-hmm.
But since we've slowed that down, we've ended up continuing to support 3 releases, but it's not really mapping to 6 months, I don't think.
Yeah.
We'll have 3 active release branches typically. Once the new release is cut, we'll close the 4th release branch and we'll stop backporting fixes. So that's kind of what I've noticed happen.
Yeah, I think that's right.
6 months.
Would it make sense to update this document and say that we will support up to 3 releases?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, could you add an action item, Gaston? You can assign it to me if you like.
Hello?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Jitao, is that you?
I think clarify when does the 2 month cycle begins also helpful. Like I think this unclear from here. Is it actually the release time, or I think what we were actually doing is, I forgot what we were actually doing, but I think the 2 months, like when do we start counting the 2 months? Clarify that may be helpful. I think previously I had some confusions about that, and I'm still not exactly sure what we are doing.
Yeah, I don't think we've been very strict about when we start it. I mean, the language here implies that, a new release will be, well, it just says a new release will be cut every 2 months. So that implies that it begins when the release is, well, I guess that's maybe vague too. Is it talking about the first RC, or is it talking about the final RC that becomes the release?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that is. I mean, well, this is a discussion we've had on and off for a long time, right? What's the proper release cadence for the project? I tend to think that going for frequent releases is a pretty good thing, because it can help make each release a smaller job, actually getting the release out the door. Like I think recently with 1.5, we ended up holding it back for some feature work. And we probably could have released 1.5 and then 1.6 by the time we got 1.5 out. So I kind of like the 2-month cadence. That seems pretty good to me. I'd be curious to hear what other people think. If we're going, like, should we just go to feature-based releases if that's kind of the pattern we're following, or is 2 months a good cadence?
So I think 2 months is 2 to 3 months is pretty good. I think from our organizations wise, am I the only one outside the Mesosphere joining today?
No, I think we have James as well.
Oh, okay.
And Kirill also.
Okay, sorry. So from our side, I think we are kind of able to catch up on this 2 to 3 month release cycle. I think it goes much more frequent than that. We will not release every version. But I think the current way makes the bisecting the issues easy enough for us. Like if something goes wrong, we can still read the change log and see which change might have triggered the problem, triggered the behavior change and stuff. Yeah.
So would you guys prefer something more like 3 months, Jito? Or does it not matter?
I think we are getting 3 months as a result.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think I don't have strong preference between these two because they are not that different. It's close enough.
Okay. Anybody else with thoughts on the release cadence? I think some organizations don't necessarily use the official releases, so it may not impact them, but yeah, anybody have
Timed is much easier to publicize.
I feel 3 months maybe slightly, like I feel 2 months sounds a little bit too frequent, like 6 releases a year. It's very hard for the community to follow up to the latest release.
Yeah. Yeah, we could switch to 3 months and really make, currently we say 2 months and we don't really accomplish that in practice. So we could change to 3 and see if we can hit that reliably.
Yeah, I guess the issue is that like if you are on a timed release cycle and like somebody really needs a feature that misses the timed release, then if you have a whole 3 months to wait until the next release, it takes a long time.
Oh, I see.
So if you had a feature-based release cycle, then it's like we need these features in this release, and you don't have to wait for the next cycle.
For time-based release, probably shorter cycle is better.
It depends on whether, yeah, right. Like that's a question.
Yeah. So what about one question I have? Let's say we actually were sticking to 2 months reliably. Then would a 6 month support period be sufficient? Do you guys think? Because currently people are getting 9 months perhaps of support.
I think we should still do 3 versions rather than 6 months. Rather unit with the month. I think 3 versions still good because from our experience, we feel like the first point release quality is always better than the .0 one, which is understandable. And I think occasionally I've seen patches went to the second point release .2. So I think having 3 versions, that will really increase people's confidence. Say, if people strongly prefer stability, and most importantly, if they don't have people dedicated on Mesos who can dig into the issue deeper, they probably go with a pretty conservative way, say, looking at 3 versions, which is more reliable, tends to be more reliable at the update, and still catch up on the features in the system. So I would vote for 3 versions.
And so even if the versions were really going out every 2 months, you think that 3 would be sufficient, Jita?
Yes, I think it's more like versions than. I think as long as enough people are using more updated versions and reporting issues, I think 3 seems like enough.
Okay.
I mean, so this is basically forces people to update every 6 months, right? If you want to be on a supported version.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it just depends on like how often people really want to upgrade. Like, are people comfortable only being on a single version of Mesos for 6 months and then changing or running unsupported versions?
Yeah. So it sounds like we're going to update this to reflect the 3 versions of support. And I would say let's just stick with the 2-month cadence here. And let's try to get a release out in the very near future and see if we can actually make that happen. Yeah, what's up?
The other thing to consider is that I think that what DCOS does is we're like shooting for timed releases, and then after the window where we have supported releases, we'll have like upon request point releases. So it's like, oh, we support 3 versions, like we'll update and we'll backport and we'll do all this stuff for however many versions back. But then after that number of versions, if someone asks us for it, we can update or backport bug fixes to that version. And so it's like, if somebody's stuck on a version, for example, and they can't update every 6 months, we would still do it, but it wouldn't be normal practice.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can anyone tell me when 1.5 actually went out?
I think it's February.
Check the blog.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometime February.
26 days ago, according to GitHub.
I think it's February 8th or something. Yeah, February 8th.
Okay. So if we did want to get another release actually out
1 month
that day, then we would want a release to go out in about a month. So how far ahead of time should we cut the first RC in order to make that happen? Like, do you guys think 1 week is generally sufficient, or 2 weeks?
Well, I think right now the problem is like it's mostly feature-based release, not like time-based. Like people have features, say, hey, I want to go in this release, and and then people will just wait for that. So it's really hard to predict that. Like if we want to strictly stick to time-based releases, then it should be a pretty smooth process. Like if you cannot make the deadline, it will not be part of that release. But I mean, in reality, it's pretty hard.
Yeah, I mean, do you think we can? I think we could probably make a 1.6 release happen in a month. Because if another release were actually going to go out 2 months from then, I'm guessing that at least people who I've been working with would probably be able to wait until that 1.7 release to get features in. Do you think that's feasible, G? Hey, G, are you there?
Do we have anything big enough for like a 1.6 release, or would it be just minor patches?
Well, if it's a
Well, there's there's no such thing as big enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also related to like advertisement, like.
Yeah, it's not gonna. It wouldn't be like 1.5 where we're like, here are all the amazing features. It would just be like, it's time for another release now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why the blogs are full of release.
It should be like easier to release that, and we shouldn't need that much time. But
yeah, I mean, I feel like for an operations tool, you want it to be really boring, right?
Yeah, right. Well, maybe I can send out an email to the mailing list, just kind of testing the waters. I would be happy to manage the next release, and maybe we can just go ahead and get the first RC cut after a couple weeks and actually get one out on the 2-month cadence. So, if there are people who speak up and say that timeline really doesn't work for them, then we could do something else. But barring that, I feel like we might as well just stick to what our stated release policy is.
so I allowed us an action item. Send an email announcing that we will release the next version in about 1 month.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So, anything else people wanted to talk about with respect to versioning and compatibility before we move on? All right. So the next thing on the list is query support for the APIs. For example, GraphQL. This is something that it's an idea that's been tossed around a lot in the past few months. And I think so I'd just like to open up the floor to generally discuss that topic. And one of the things in particular that I wanted to get out of the discussion were some concrete use cases that people have in mind for this, so that whatever we end up doing along those lines actually makes sense for people. So if anybody has does anyone have like a concrete use case or an example of a situation in which this kind of support would make a difference for them?
I have one, at least one. One would be, the first would be searching for specific task which matches a label key or value.
Okay. Okay.
Another idea I had, although I don't know whether GraphQL is expensive enough, is it possible to say we authorize certain actions performed on something using GraphQL match rather than a strict match?
Can we authorize?
Let me explain the idea. I don't know how to formulate it. So I think right now the authorization system in Mesos is say we authorize a principal to do some action on an object, on an entity. Is that statement right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes we got confused with terminology. So that entity usually is a hard match string or something. For example, we say we only authorize a user, a framework or principle to launch a task under a user. I think that is especially for task launching, that is the API. I think our side eventually will say, we only want to authorize the framework to launch a task whose container image is something. The matching will not be done on user part, but more like other field of the thing. And that field might be quite flexible. We may not be able to introduce one authorization item per different entity or subject. That is where I'm interested in whether GraphQL can be expressive enough to say that, or is there something else to say?
Okay, so I think one way in which we've addressed that for other authorization actions is to use, well, so we've attempted in other cases to provide enough context in the authorization API to authorize based on a variety of fields. I think that task launch is one case where that hasn't been done, but we authorize some actions based on something like framework info, which contains a lot of information, and people might authorize based on different things there. I'm not sure how GraphQL might be used in that case. Did you have any idea of how it might be leveraged?
I have not. Maybe I should follow up with you on the email about this framework.
Yeah.
So like contexting first, understand how that looks like, and then I have not really got time to play with GraphQL a lot this time.
Okay, yeah, the security use case was not one I had really considered. So maybe it will turn out to be useful for this, I'm not sure. But in any case, we should certainly talk about your authorization issues there. I'd be happy to chat about that with you.
Yeah.
Jita, did you guys have any other GraphQL use cases in mind?
I think most other things are not obvious at this point. So I'll just be interested in what the API can do.
Okay.
I feel like for this query languages, it's more useful, say, like people don't need to go into the Mesos proto and look at, okay, it's the structure is like we have member first, and then slave, and then tenant or whatever. Like they don't need to first go through the whole proto definition, but can just do a query, say, I want to get it. I have a test ID. I want to get the result, the task status, etc. So it's maybe a little bit easier for users to get status or something they need without knowing through the internal structure messages.
You're saying it'll be easier to get what you need without knowing the internal structure?
Or without knowing the structure the Mesos laid out, like.
Because the query language gives you kind of a generic way to match on,
yes.
on fields? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
James, what about you guys? I know that you have performance concerns around getting state output. Was that, like, had you guys thought about having query support in Mesos as a solution for that? Hey, James, are you there? Maybe not. That's okay. That's one of the things that I had heard from folks as well, was just a desire to be able to get less than the entire state JSON output.
Yes, because right now, from my experience, when we get the state information, it's like the big payload, even if you want to get one or two fields, which is probably best match querying.
Yeah. So, Carol, are there particular fields that you would filter on, or like, is there particular information that you need to get from state that you?
Yes, because I need just few fields, like for some framework. I don't remember what exactly fields, but it was like I need only 2 or 3 fields. But I get the big payload, so it's also some provides some network traffic increase, and yeah, I don't know. Also, GraphQL provides it might be one of the feature that it provides the interface where you can simply find all these fields and explore probably because sometimes it's very hard to find necessary information on Mesos documentation, and that could be like a self-documented, I don't know, infrastructure where you can just open some simple page and execute all these queries, find what exactly you get from Mesos.
Okay, cool. Did anyone else have any thoughts on query support, GraphQL, or otherwise?
Yeah. The one thing that I'm still trying to think through is this, can we, sorry, there's a lot of background noise in mission control.
Oh, hold on, let me mute it.
The one thing I was trying to think through is, can we do this in a way that it's something that can be done, something that can be used across our API rather than just on a specific piece of our API, right? Like if we just added a new state endpoint which lets you query, you wouldn't say be able to use that when you're say subscribing to the operator API to get events of the cluster.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's still useful because like if you look at the subscription API, it's essentially the same thing. You're going to get a full dump of the state followed by updates. And that initial payload might be still too big for people. So I'm just hoping that there's something we can do where it's a more universal filtering across the API rather than a specific, you know, GraphQL endpoint or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. So is performance the major concern that we're hoping to address with query support like that? Just not forcing people to get an entire object and allowing them to get smaller pieces of it to improve performance? Is that our primary objective there?
Yes, it is from my side.
Yeah.
I feel it's also easier to use. Like every time I look at state, I'll definitely like use JQ to filter something so I can understand what I'm looking at. So it may be easier to use, like to view a filtered result.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, unless anybody has any other thoughts along those lines, we can continue to the next item. Anybody? All right. Chunhung, you put down the next item, alternatives to REST API. What are you thinking there?
Well, yeah, there is a lot of discussion about whether we, like for example, we probably want to introduce new V2 API based on non like gRPC or other RPC frameworks. So our V0 API is more like library dependent. Our V1 is purely library independent, but it's actually hard to like write framework against or write other application against it. And so maybe depends on like some third-party RPC frameworks is a good alternative for future API.
So And what framework are you thinking in particular, or are you?
Well, one thing we've been discussing is that maybe we can try out gRPC, but the concern is, first of all, gRPC, there's no like public performance evaluation for using gRPC in production. That would be the main concern. And also for gRPC, there are some difficulties that I chatted with Ben about, like we have multiple HTTP server. gRPC is not like IO, like it has its own event loop for IO processing, which may be uncompatible with our currently process. There are some other things we probably need to address if you want to use gRPC. And there are other alternatives, like G mentioned. There is a RPC framework developed by Baidu called BRPC. I haven't taken a look yet. Probably I can like go through it and see if it is a good alternative. And also G mentioned like we probably can look at how Kubernetes API server works. Maybe we can like find some insight from there, or adapt their way to handle APIs.
Yeah, I think +1 on gRPC. That I think the nice thing about gRPC is you don't have to worry about how to generate client code. The gRPC framework is going to generate the client for you, and it's generate client for every single language. And for example, Python. Like, do we have a binding for Python? Probably not right now, and it's under maintained. I think by switching to like a common like RPC framework like gRPC, we don't have that issue anymore. People can just start using those generated clients to talk to Mesos. It just simplify all lower the bar of creating a framework.
+1 to what Jie said. I think both the things Uber maintains that talks to Mesos, as well as any other programming language at Uber which is not directly talking to Mesos yet, all have proper gRPC bindings. So this would mean we can safely get rid of all this layer of like an interesting part of interacting with Mesos direct library and focus really on the logic part.
Right. I think like for some language that I know, for example, Go, I know there are a few bindings out there. There's some Mesos Go. There's some other binding. I think there might be multiple Go binding there, but none of them is properly maintained. Well, like Mesos Go is maintained by James from Mesosphere, but I'm not sure about other bindings. But still, like it's if you compare it to a generated client like gRPC, is still like much preferred. I mean, I think gRPC is still much more preferred. And it's maintained by the entire gRPC community. So,
and so what about this performance issue? Is that something we're concerned about? Can we just toss it aside, or?
Well, we need to get some data. I mean, I'm not sure like if Uber is using. Oh, sorry. I mean, Zhita, I'm not sure if Uber is using gRPC. Like, do you have real data to show like any data to show like the performance of gRPC, like in terms of like latency or like tail latency, 9999 latency, things like this?
I don't have that data here, but what I can say is our RPC team is slowly encouraging people to move from our own stuff, something called T-channel, as well as the Thrift, onto gRPC slowly. Mm-hmm. So I think we are a Go heavy firm, so I think they only do perform testing for the Go part, both mm-hmm. server and the client. Mm-hmm. I don't know about how this compares with the other languages so far.
Yeah, I think gRPC. I think okay. Yeah, I think like have some data on like the gRPC performance will be useful. To kind of answer. I think like I heard some concern about folks talking about tail latency about gRPC framework, and they want predictable performance, things like this. But we don't have really real data to show that. But I think like performance might be less of a concern. I think it's more about API, like a nice API RPC framework.
Yeah, I mean the only place where I would be concerned about performance is the master, because people run very large clusters with very large numbers of connections, and I just don't know if people are pushing gRPC that hard yet. So that's something to consider.
Yeah, I think, but I think maybe one way is like we introduce both, like support both APIs and let people pick which one they want to go, and they can experiment the gRPC. I mean, the only way you can figure out that is by running that.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I think like there's no alternative. Like I think I mentioned to Chun, like there's some other RPC frameworks like BRPC, but I think I will be worried about the maintenance. Like who is maintaining that repo? Like is it get good support? I mean, gRPC get a huge community behind that, so I think I really don't see an alternative to gRPC at this moment.
Yeah, I think if it's 3 years ago, I would try Thrift a little bit, but even now, while our company has migrated more than half of things onto Thrift, we have slowly to migrate off of it for all new stuff. So, and I think BRPC do not have only heard that they have C++ binding. Even Java is not released yet.
Yeah, I think I briefly looked at BRPC. Yeah, the number of bindings compared to gRPC is small.
Yeah, I don't really think there's an alternative either. I just don't want to be debugging mysterious gRPC bugs and trying to diagnose performance issues. That's kind of my main thing. But if we let companies try it out, the people with large installations try it out and then tell us what doesn't work performance-wise, then that's less of a issue.
I think if anyone can reach out to people from Lyft, it's funny from my side, but I think they should have some experience about gRPC on C++ stack. Like the people.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Making their Envoy and related project. I think they have more experience than us on this topic.
Well, do you know they're using gRPC or?
I think I saw Envoy and gRPC mentioned together. So
okay. Yeah, I know Envoy has a gRPC proxy mode. So, like the Envoy support gRPC. Yeah, so I can ask them. I can reach out and see if they have some data to show that. Yeah, I can reach out to that.
Yeah, I'll reach out to some internal teams working on C++ and see what they are doing and what they feel on this one. No promise about any result here. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it'll be nice to get like tail latency because I heard someone mention that to me a long time ago that the tail latency is pretty high, like 9999. Like tail latency is pretty high. But yeah, it'll be nice to get those information.
Cool. I added an action item for you, G, to reach out to those folks. We can see what they say.
Yeah, I can reach out to Lyft folks on this.
Thank you.
Okay, my question is like, what's the plan as a working group? Like, we have a bunch of people that are trying to work on this, and I'm interested. I'm not sure if anyone else is interested.
Interested in gRPC specifically, you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, how do we work together to get that done?
I'm interested too, since this can remove 3,000 lines of code that's under my name.
I think that ties into another topic which I've wanted to bring up at some point to this group, which is if we want to do something like a V2, the hope with V2 is that we would clean up unfortunate decisions in the API, but we currently aren't doing anything to actually keep track of those. And so what's likely going to happen with V2 is we don't clean things up and we just kind of copy everything over, which would seem unfortunate to me. And so we need some process or something to do an audit of what we have and try to remember all the things that we find unfortunate and want to change. There's a question of whether that's going to be hard for people to upgrade to or not, but that was the hope for V2, at least, was that we could make those breaking changes to finally clean some stuff up.
Okay. Yeah, I think, Ben, there are three questions. One is, how do we track those tech debt on API that we want to clean up in the next major version? I think maybe one solution is just use labels on Jira, and then whenever you find something that's unfortunate, just create a Jira and use a special label there, and then we need to decide what's the label name here so that we can track those. That was just my suggestion on that issue. The second question is whether V1 and V2 should be backwards compatible. I feel like it should not. By definition, it should not. And I think we should definitely allow us to do some breaking changes in V2 so that we can clean up those unfortunate APIs that we introduced in the code base. And the third problem, the third issue is whether the gRPC support should be in V2 or in V1. So that's something that I haven't figured out. Like, is it possible to still, is it possible? I mean, one question I have is is it possible to enable V1, enable gRPC and still assuming the V1 support? Like, you're still using the V1 protobuf, but have introduced gRPC support rather than waiting for V2. That's more like a question. I'm not sure what other folks are thinking. My hunch is like, I would rather like move faster and kind of introduce like gRPC support for V1 protobufs, and then at the same time thinking about what we should do for V2. I mean, yeah, I think the nice thing is you get some experience when you're building that support, and we don't want to like rush for V2.
Yeah, it also depends on when people are wanting to start work on gRPC. If people want to start work on that now, then we should probably just add it to V1, right? Because V2 is not going to happen too soon.
Yeah, my suggestion is let's do some experimental support for gRPC, but still assuming those V1 protobufs. Like we don't do any API level change, just adding an RPC framework to Mesos so that people can use gRPC client to talk to Mesos.
Yeah. So G, you were asking how we should work on gRPC support. Should we just set a separate meeting sometime soon for interested people who want to work on that?
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm interested, but I mean, I mean, my company is probably not interested, but I'm interested. So yeah, so sure, let's have a meeting on this.
Hey, Jita, would you be willing to take that action item?
Which one?
Setting a meeting for interested parties in gRPC support.
Sure. Yeah, I can do that.
Cool. Thank you. We could maybe just send out an email to the dev list and find out who's interested. I would be interested in attending that also. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I feel like if people meet and decide they're going to start working on it right away, that kind of answers the V1 versus V2 question, right?
Well, yeah, that's just my thoughts that we should not wait until V2 to do gRPC. And we should be very cautious on, I mean, given what Ben said is like we have a lot of tech debt on the API that we need to clean up, and we probably need to collect those and make sure that our V2 API kind of address on the tech debt that we have rather than just leaving those tech debt forever in the code base.
Yeah.
I mean, for V2, I was also like, I was thinking like maybe like sometime we just do a branch and then remove all these code that we don't want to support in V2 in the code base, in the project. I mean, at some time, like when we decide to say, hey, I think it's time to start like developing for V2, do a branch there, and then in the V2 branch, just remove all the things that we don't think, I mean, we think it's tech debt or either tech debt. Don't worry about backwards compatibility because V2, V1 should not be backwards compatible, and do those cleanup that we want to do for a long time.
Yeah. Should we start an epic for V2 work and just start adding tickets to that as a way to track this tech debt?
Yeah, so that's my suggestion. Maybe create a label. Let's decide on a label name, like maybe just call V2, or I mean V2 tech debt, whatever. Or like another way is you create an epic called V2 and then just drag those tickets into that epic.
Yeah, just please publicize that process so that everyone knows.
Yeah, my feeling is that an epic would be a little more obvious. It's like more of a high level thing in Jira. Are you guys okay with an epic?
Greg, my only other suggestion would be fixed version, if you guys do that, which I don't know if you do.
Yeah, fixed version is a little, you have to click the fixed version and that show up as a filter. Yeah, it's less obvious than an epic. I agree with Greg. I think an epic will be much more obvious that you just need to click a single link and then all the subtasks are showing up in that epic.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I can create an epic for that stuff, and I will certainly publicize it on the mailing lists. Okay, well, we're just about out of time. Anything anybody wanted to bring up in our last minute here? No? Okay, well, I really appreciate everyone showing up. It's great to have our first meeting. I will send out an email to the mailing list, just sending out the notes, and we will have another meeting in 2 weeks. Oh, I guess should have asked before. Does this time generally work pretty well for everybody? Is there anyone who objects to this time as a recurring time?
No, this one sounds good.
Works for me so far.
Okay, cool. So maybe we can just plan with every 2 weeks at this time for now, and we can adjust if we need to in the future.
Greg, I'll just set this meeting to recur.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you, Judith. Great. Well, thanks for showing up, everybody. It's great to see y'all, and I'll see you later. Have a good one.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.